Why Thai people value Kreng Jai more than rules. Chapter 1. The rule I thought everyone ignored. Before I came to Thailand, I believed rules were the clearest language in the world. A sign said, stop. A line meant wait. A schedule meant arrive on time. A rule, I thought, was like a quiet wall built between strangers, keeping everything fair, simple, and safe. So when I first heard that Thai people sometimes cared more about something called Kreng Jai than about written rules, I misunderstood it completely. I thought it meant people were afraid to speak. I thought it meant they avoided honesty. I thought it meant rules did not matter. But one rainy evening in a small town outside Chiang Mai, while sitting beneath a tin roof beside a woman selling noodle soup, I began to understand that I had been looking at Thailand with the wrong eyes. The rain had started just before sunset. Not the dramatic kind of rain that crashes down suddenly, but the soft northern rain that seems to arrive with permission. It touched the banana leaves first, then the temple wall, then the road, then the roofs of little shops glowing in the blue evening. I was staying in a quiet guest house near a narrow lane where dogs slept under parked motorbikes and old men sat outside with cups of tea, watching the world pass as though it were a familiar movie. My name is Thomas Reed. I am a travel writer from England. At least, that is what I called myself then. In truth, I had arrived in Thailand carrying more questions than stories. That evening, I walked toward a small noodle stall because of the smell. Garlic, pork broth, fresh coriander, charcoal smoke from somewhere nearby. The smell moved through the rain like a hand gently guiding me forward. The stall had no sign in English, just a few plastic tables, a glass cabinet of noodles, and a silver pot breathing steam into the night. A middle-aged woman in a blue apron looked up and smiled. "You eat?" she asked. "Yes, please," I said. "Whatever is good." She laughed softly. "Everything good." I sat at a small red table near the edge of the roof. Rain dripped steadily from the awning. Across the lane, a temple gate stood half open, and golden light spilled from inside like warm water. A few minutes later, she placed a bowl in front of me. Clear soup, thin noodles, slices of pork, green onions floating like little pieces of garden. I thanked her and began to eat. It was simple. It was perfect. Then I noticed something strange. There was a line of people waiting near the stall, but no one stood in a proper line. A man arrived first, then a woman with a child, then two teenagers, then an old monk holding an umbrella. In my mind, the order was obvious. First come, first served. But the noodle seller served the monk first, then the woman with the child, then the old man who had arrived after everyone else. No one complained. No one frowned. No one even looked surprised. I sat there, spoon halfway to my mouth, quietly confused. In England, someone would have cleared their throat. Someone would have said, "Excuse me, I was next." But here, the air remained soft. The rain kept falling. The people kept waiting. And somehow, nothing felt unfair. When the noodle seller came back to wipe the table beside me, I asked carefully, "Is there no line?" She looked at me for a moment, then smiled as if the question was not rude, only young. "There is line," she said. I looked at the scattered people. "Where?" She tapped her chest lightly. "Here." I did not understand. She saw my confusion and laughed quietly. "Monk go first. Mother with child go first. Uncle very old. We wait. Not problem." "But if someone was first?" She nodded. "Yes, but he can wait." "Why?" She paused. The rain tapped the roof above us. Then she said the first sentence that stayed with me for years. "Because we think about his heart too. His heart. Not his position. Not his ticket. Not the written order of arrival. His heart." I looked at the people waiting again. The teenagers were talking softly. The man who had arrived first was looking at his phone, completely relaxed. The mother was feeding her child small bites from her bowl. The monk stood quietly under the roof. His robe darkened slightly by rain. No one seemed to feel cheated. The rule had not disappeared. It had bent gently around human feeling. And that was my first glimpse of Kreng Jai. Not fear, not weakness, not dishonesty. Something much quieter. Something harder to translate. A kind of carefulness with other people's comfort. A way of asking before speaking or acting. Will this make someone feel uncomfortable? Will this create pressure? Will this disturb the peace of the room? Will this make another person lose face? Back then, I only understood a small part. Very small. I finished my noodles slowly while the rain softened the whole street. Later, an elderly man sat across from me because all the tables were full. He wore a white shirt, loose brown trousers, and sandals wet from the rain. He nodded politely. "You travel alone?" he asked. "Yes." "First time Thailand?" "Yes." He smiled. "Then many things strange." I laughed. "Yes, many things." He pointed gently toward the noodle seller. "You ask about line?" I felt embarrassed. A little. He did not laugh at me. He only nodded, as though this was a door many foreigners had to pass through. "In your country," he said, "rule outside. In Thailand, sometimes rule outside, but feeling inside." I repeated it quietly. "Feeling inside." He nodded. If only rule may be correct, but maybe not kind. The words were simple, almost too simple. Yet under the rain, beside that little bowl of soup, they felt like the beginning of a long lesson. I had come to Thailand expecting temples, beaches, food, and smiles. I had not expected to discover an invisible social language, a language without signs, without written instructions, without anyone announcing it. And yet everyone around me seemed to read it. That night, walking back to the guest house, I noticed things I had missed before. A young man moved his motorbike quietly instead of starting it loudly near an old woman's house. A shopkeeper lowered her music when monks passed by. A child offered his chair to a grandmother without being told. A woman on the phone stepped away from the food stall so her voice would not disturb others. None of these actions were laws. No police officer watched. No sign demanded them. But they happened, softly, naturally, like rain finding the lowest place to rest. When I reached the guest house, the owner, a gentle man named Arun, was sitting near the entrance with a cup of tea. "You walk in rain?" he asked. "A little." He smiled. "Good rain. Sleep well tonight." I stood there for a moment, listening to the water dripping from the roof. Then I asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What does Kreng Jai really mean?" Arun leaned back in his chair. Outside, the lane was dark except for one orange streetlight. He thought for a long time before answering. "Kreng Jai means," he paused, "I don't want to trouble you. I don't want to make you feel bad. I think about you before I do something." "That sounds polite." "Yes," he said, "but deeper than polite. How?" He looked toward the rain. "Polite is what you show. Kreng Jai is what you feel before you show." I wrote that sentence in my notebook later. Polite is what you show. Kreng Jai is what you feel before you show. That night, I lay in bed listening to the rain on the roof. The room smelled faintly of wood, mosquito coil, and clean cotton sheets. Somewhere outside, a gecko clicked softly. A motorbike passed once, then silence returned. I thought of the noodle stall, the monk, the mother, the old man, the invisible line held not by rules, but by consideration. And for the first time, I wondered whether my own way of seeing fairness was too narrow. Perhaps fairness was not always about being first. Perhaps respect was not always about saying what you wanted. Perhaps society did not only survive because people followed rules. Sometimes it survived because people noticed one another. Before sleep took me, I heard Arun closing the wooden gate downstairs. He did it slowly, carefully, without a sound, as if even the night itself deserved Kreng Jai. And in that quiet moment, Thailand became more than a place I was visiting. It became a question, a gentle one. What if kindness sometimes knows how to walk around a rule without breaking the heart of it? Chapter 2, The Office Where Nobody Said No. The next morning arrived quietly. The rain had disappeared during the night, leaving the town washed clean and shining beneath a pale northern sky. Sunlight touched the temple roofs. Birds called from mango trees. The air smelled of wet earth and jasmine. I woke earlier than usual and sat on the small balcony outside my room, drinking instant coffee while watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. An old woman swept leaves from her front step. A monk walked barefoot along the road collecting alms. A schoolboy in a neatly pressed uniform rode past on a bicycle, one hand balancing a plastic bag of breakfast. Everything seemed gentle, unhurried, as though the town had agreed not to rush the morning. Yet despite the peaceful scene, my mind kept returning to the conversation from the noodle stall. Kreng Jai, the invisible force that somehow shaped behavior more powerfully than rules. I understood the idea in theory, but I still could not fully understand how it worked in daily life. That answer arrived unexpectedly 3 days later. It began with a broken air conditioner. At the time, I was renting a small room above a family-owned travel agency in Chiang Mai. The owner, a cheerful woman named Pim, had offered the room at a discount because I planned to stay for several weeks while working on a travel article. The room was simple: wooden furniture, a small desk, a narrow balcony, an aging air conditioner attached to the wall. Most days it worked perfectly. Then one afternoon it stopped. Without warning, the fan slowed, the machine rattled, then silence. Outside, the temperature hovered near 35 degrees Celsius. Inside, the room quickly became an oven. I went downstairs to tell Pim. She was helping a customer book a bus ticket and greeted me with her usual smile. "Thomas, everything okay?" Actually, the air conditioner stopped working. Her smile disappeared instantly. Not because she was angry, because she looked genuinely worried. "Oh no, it's okay," I said. "These things happen. I call technician whenever convenient." Yes. She picked up her phone immediately. I expected the problem to be solved quickly, but something strange happened over the next few days. Every morning I asked politely whether the technician had arrived. Every morning Pim smiled and said, "Soon." Tomorrow became the next day. The next day became another day. The room remained hot. The technician remained invisible. Yet, every time I asked, Pim seemed uncomfortable. Not annoyed, not defensive, uncomfortable, as though my question itself created a burden. Finally, after nearly a week, I sat in a cafe with a young Thai teacher named Niran, whom I had met through a friend. When I mentioned the situation, he laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "You have become trapped by Kreng Jai. I don't think I understand." "Oh, I think you do." He pointed at me. "You don't want to pressure Pim." "No, she doesn't want to disappoint you." "Correct. She may have called the technician already." "Maybe. The technician may not want to tell her he is too busy." "That sounds possible." "The technician also doesn't want to disappoint her." I blinked. Niran nodded. "Everyone trying to protect everyone, and nobody fixes the air conditioner?" "Exactly." We both laughed, but his explanation fascinated me. In my culture, efficiency often came before feelings. If there was a problem, you said so, directly, clearly. The goal was solving the issue. In Thailand, I was beginning to see another priority: maintaining harmony, preserving relationships, avoiding unnecessary discomfort. Neither approach was perfect. Neither was completely wrong. They simply valued different things. That evening, Niran invited me to join him for dinner at his family's house. Their home sat on a quiet street lined with flowering trees. The house itself was modest but beautiful. Open windows, polished wooden floors, the smell of garlic and basil drifting from the kitchen. His mother welcomed me warmly. His father shook my hand. His grandmother sat quietly near a window, shelling peas into a bowl. The atmosphere felt immediately comforting. As dinner began, I noticed something unusual. Nobody served themselves first. Instead, dishes moved slowly around the table. Everyone encouraging others to take food, everyone insisting someone else should begin. "No, you first." "No, please." "No, take some more." "No, it's okay." The exchange continued with almost ceremonial patience. Finally, I asked about it. Niran's grandmother smiled. "We think of others first." His father nodded. "Sometimes too much." Everyone laughed. Then his mother turned to me. "You know Kreng Jai?" "A little." She shook her head gently. "No, you know definition, not feeling." The room filled with soft laughter. I knew she was right. Definitions were easy. Experiences were harder. After dinner, we sat outside beneath strings of yellow light. Crickets sang from nearby gardens. The air smelled of wet grass. Niran's father poured tea into small cups. Then he asked me a question. In England, if your boss makes a mistake, you tell him directly? Usually. And if friend cooks bad food? I hesitated. Maybe not directly. Everyone laughed again. His father pointed. See, every culture has Kreng Jai. I considered that. Perhaps he was right. Maybe the difference was not whether consideration existed. Maybe it was how strongly it shaped daily behavior. His grandmother nodded thoughtfully. When I was young, my mother taught me something. What was it? She looked toward the garden. Before speaking, ask if words help. Simple, yet beautiful. Before speaking, ask if words help. Not whether they are correct, not whether they prove a point, whether they help. The conversation drifted into stories about family, neighbors, and village life. Again and again, I heard the same theme. People adjusting themselves slightly for the comfort of others. Small sacrifices, small accommodations, tiny acts invisible to outsiders. A son pretending not to notice his father's mistake. A neighbor accepting inconvenience to avoid embarrassment. A shopkeeper extending credit without making someone lose face. None of these actions appeared in law books, yet they shaped everyday life. As the evening grew darker, I realized something. Foreign visitors often see only the surface of Thai behavior, the smiles, the politeness, the indirect communication. And because they do not understand the deeper logic, they sometimes assume people are avoiding honesty. But what I was witnessing felt different. Not dishonesty. Sensitivity, the desire to preserve dignity, to avoid causing pain unnecessarily, to keep relationships intact. Of course, this approach sometimes created problems. The broken air conditioner proved that. Even Niran admitted it. Sometimes we need more directness. Do Thai people know that? Of course. And yet, he smiled. And yet, we are Thai. A few days later, the technician finally arrived. The repair took less than 20 minutes. A loose electrical connection. Nothing serious. Afterward, Pim apologized repeatedly. I am very sorry. It's okay. No, really. Honestly, it was fine. She looked relieved. Then she admitted something. The technician told me he busy. So why didn't you tell me? She smiled awkwardly. I don't want you disappointed. There it was again. The invisible thread. Not efficiency. Not rules. Not procedure. Feelings. Relationships. Consideration. Kreng Jai. That evening, I walked through Chiang Mai's old city as the sun sank behind ancient walls. The streets glowed gold. Temple bells echoed softly. Food vendors prepared dinner. Tourists wandered beneath lanterns. And everywhere I looked, I noticed examples of the same quiet cultural rhythm. People moving aside for one another, speaking gently, offering space, avoiding confrontation whenever possible, not because they lacked opinions, not because they lacked courage, but because harmony itself carried value, a value difficult to see if you came from a culture where honesty was measured mainly by directness. Near one temple gate, I stopped to watch two young monks sweeping fallen leaves. One monk accidentally scattered a pile the other had just finished gathering. For a moment, I expected frustration. Instead, both monks laughed, then quietly started again. No blame, no complaint, just patience. The sky darkened slowly above them, and somehow that small scene stayed with me, because it reminded me of something I was only beginning to learn. Thailand often asks a different question than the one I grew up with. Not, who is right, but how can we stay connected? Not, whose turn is it, but who needs consideration most? Not, what does the rule say, but what will happen to the people involved? As night settled over Chiang Mai, I returned to my room. The air conditioner hummed happily once again. Outside, distant tempo chanting drifted through the warm darkness. I lay in bed, listening, thinking, learning, slowly realizing that Kreng Jai was not merely a social habit. It was a way of seeing other people, a way of carrying awareness, a quiet reminder that every action enters someone else's world. And sometimes, in Thailand, protecting that world matters just as much as following the rules, maybe even more. And somewhere beyond the open window, beneath the stars of northern Thailand, another lesson was already waiting for me, one that would challenge my understanding of honesty itself. Chapter 3, the meeting where nobody disagreed. A week later, I found myself sitting in a community hall on the edge of a small village outside Chiang Mai. The hall was simple, a high roof, wooden beams darkened by time, plastic chairs arranged in neat rows, large open windows that allowed the afternoon breeze to drift through freely. Outside, rice fields stretched toward distant mountains softened by mist. The village headman had invited me to attend a local meeting after hearing that I was writing about everyday life in Thailand. "You want to understand Thai people?" he had asked with a smile. "Then come listen." I happily accepted. Back home in England, community meetings could be lively affairs. People debated. Arguments emerged. Someone usually disagreed. Someone almost always interrupted. The process could be messy, but it often produced clear decisions. So I expected something similar. What I witnessed instead left me completely puzzled. The meeting began shortly after 4 in the afternoon. Around 20 villagers gathered inside. Farmers, shop owners, teachers, retirees, young parents. Everyone greeted one another warmly. Tea was served. Snacks were shared. Conversations drifted gently through the room. Eventually, the village headman stood and thanked everyone for attending. The topic seemed straightforward. A narrow road near the village school needed repairs. During the rainy season, large puddles formed and made travel difficult. Several possible solutions had already been proposed. Simple enough, I thought. The discussion began. One person spoke, then another, then another. Everyone smiled, everyone nodded, everyone seemed agreeable. After nearly an hour, I noticed something odd. Nobody disagreed. Not once. Not openly. Not directly. Every suggestion received supportive comments. Every opinion was acknowledged. Every speaker was treated with respect. Yet somehow no clear decision was being made. I leaned toward a teacher sitting beside me. Her name was Molly. "Do they all agree?" I whispered. Molly smiled. "Not really." I blinked. "They don't?" "No." I looked around the room, but nobody is disagreeing. She laughed softly. "That doesn't mean agreement." I watched more carefully. A farmer proposed widening the road. Several people nodded. Then another villager said, "That is a good idea, but perhaps there are other possibilities." A shop owner suggested adding drainage. Everyone praised the suggestion. Then another person commented, "Interesting, we should think carefully." A retired teacher proposed asking the district government for support. Again, smiles. Again, approval. Again, no direct opposition. At first, it felt almost impossible to understand. Back home, disagreement often sounded like disagreement. Here, it seemed hidden beneath layers of politeness. After the meeting ended, I walked outside with Molly. The sun was sinking toward the mountains. The rice fields glowed gold. Water buffalo stood quietly in distant paddies. The entire landscape seemed wrapped in evening calm. I finally asked a question that had been bothering me. Why didn't anyone disagree? Molly laughed. "Oh, many people disagreed, but nobody said so. Some did." "When?" She looked amused. "You didn't hear it?" Apparently, I had not. We walked slowly along a dirt path beside the field. The breeze carried the smell of wet earth and growing rice. Molly explained patiently. In Thailand, disagreement is often indirect. Why? Because direct disagreement can create embarrassment. For whom? She smiled. Everyone. I consider this. Back home, disagreement was often viewed as healthy, even productive. You challenged ideas, tested assumptions, debated openly. In Thailand, however, there seemed to be another concern: protecting relationships, preserving dignity, avoiding unnecessary tension. Molly stopped beside a small irrigation canal. The water moved slowly through the fields. Imagine you suggest something in front of 20 people. Okay, and I immediately tell you that you're wrong. I nodded. How would you feel? A little embarrassed. Exactly. She picked up a small leaf and let it float on the water. Sometimes the goal is not winning the discussion. What is the goal? She watched the leaf drift away, keeping everyone together. The answer sounded simple. Yet the more I thought about it, the deeper it became. Many cultures value truth. Many cultures value efficiency. But Thailand often places extraordinary value on social harmony. Not because truth is unimportant, but because relationships matter too, perhaps even more than outsiders realize. That evening, Molly invited me to visit her family's farm. The farm sat just beyond the village, a collection of wooden buildings surrounded by fruit trees. Mango, longan, banana, papaya. Children played beneath the trees, while chickens wandered freely through the yard. As darkness arrived, the family gathered outside for dinner. The atmosphere felt relaxed and welcoming. A single light bulb hung above the table. Crickets sang from every direction. The mountains had become dark silhouettes beneath a sky filled with stars. During dinner, I mentioned the village meeting. Immediately, everyone smiled. Even Molly's grandfather laughed. "You thought everybody agreed?" "Yes," the old man chuckled. "Foreigners always think that." The family laughed again. I laughed too. Then I asked him why. He took his time answering. Like many older Thai people I met, he seemed comfortable allowing silence to exist. He did not rush words, he let them arrive naturally. Finally, he spoke. "When I was young, my father taught me something." "What was it?" The old man pointed toward a bamboo fence. "If bamboo fights bamboo, both break." I followed his gaze. The fence moved gently in the evening breeze. "But if bamboo bends," he continued, "it survives the storm." Nobody spoke for a moment. Only the sound of insects filled the night. Then Molly translated the deeper meaning. Sometimes being flexible is stronger than being right. That sentence stayed with me. Flexible is stronger than being right. It sounded almost backwards compared to the culture I had grown up in. Yet in Thailand, I was beginning to see evidence of it everywhere. The next morning offered another lesson. I accompanied Molly to a local market. The market sat beside a small river. Boats drifted slowly past. Vendors arranged vegetables beneath colorful umbrellas. The air smelled of herbs, grilled fish, and fresh fruit. Near one stall, an elderly customer accidentally knocked over a basket of tomatoes. They rolled across the ground in every direction. The customer immediately apologized. The vendor smiled. "No problem." Several nearby shoppers helped gather the tomatoes. Nobody complained. Nobody blamed. Nobody demanded compensation. Within moments, everything was restored. The incident disappeared as quickly as it had happened. I thought about what would happen in some other places. Perhaps irritation, perhaps arguments, perhaps embarrassment. Here, the group seemed to instinctively move toward restoring comfort rather than assigning fault. Again, I noticed the same pattern, not the absence of responsibility, the presence of consideration. Later that afternoon, while sitting beside the river drinking iced tea, I asked Molly a question. "Does Kreng Jai ever create problems?" She laughed immediately. "Of course." Such as? She began counting on her fingers. People don't ask for help when they need it. Okay, they avoid difficult conversations. Makes sense. They say yes when they mean maybe. I smiled. "I've noticed that." She laughed. "Everybody notices that." The honesty surprised me. For the first time, I realized that Thai people themselves were fully aware of the challenges created by Kreng Jai. It wasn't a perfect system. No culture is perfect. Every cultural value solves some problems while creating others. Directness creates clarity but can hurt feelings. Indirectness protects feelings but can create confusion. Neither side holds all the answers. The real lesson, perhaps, was understanding why people behaved the way they did. As the afternoon faded toward evening, we sat quietly watching the river. Children splashed in the water. A fisherman checked his nets. Temple bells echoed faintly from somewhere across the fields. The world seemed peaceful, almost suspended in time. Then Molly told me a story. Several years earlier, her father had become seriously ill. The family faced difficult decisions, medical bills, travel arrangements, work responsibilities. Friends and neighbors learned about the situation. Without being asked, people began helping. One family delivered food. Another drove relatives to appointments. A shop owner quietly provided supplies. Nobody kept records. Nobody expected repayment. Nobody announced their generosity. They simply noticed a burden and helped carry it. Why? I asked. Molly smiled. Because of Kreng Jai. I thought Kreng Jai meant not wanting to trouble others. She nodded. It does. Then why help? Because if you care about other people's burdens, you notice them. I sat silently for a moment. That idea felt important. Very important. Perhaps outsiders often see only one side of Kreng Jai. The hesitation, the indirectness, the avoidance of confrontation. But beneath those behaviors lived something deeper. Awareness, sensitivity, attention to the emotional weight other people carry. A willingness to make small sacrifices for collective comfort. As twilight settled over the river, the water reflected shades of orange and purple. The first stars appeared overhead. Somewhere nearby, someone played soft music. The notes drifted through the evening air like distant memories. I thought back to the village meeting. At first, it had seemed inefficient, confusing, even frustrating. But now I saw another layer. The participants were not simply discussing a road. They were protecting a community. Every word mattered. Every interaction affected relationships that would continue long after the meeting ended. They were neighbors, friends, relatives, people who would see each other every day. In that context, harmony carried real value, not abstract value, practical value, human value. The sky darkened completely. Lights appeared in homes along the riverbank, and as the evening settled gently around us, I realized that Thailand was teaching me something unexpected. Sometimes people avoid conflict not because they fear the truth, but because they value the relationship that must survive after the truth is spoken. And that difference changes everything. Far above the quiet fields, the stars shone steadily over northern Thailand. And somewhere beyond those stars, another lesson was waiting. A lesson that would reveal why Thai people sometimes apologize even when they have done nothing wrong. Chapter 4. The apology that wasn't an apology. By the time I reached my second month in Thailand, I had started noticing something that confused me almost every day. People apologized constantly. Not the formal apologies I knew from England. Not the kind that followed mistakes or accidents. These apologies appeared in situations where nobody seemed to have done anything wrong. A waitress would say sorry while bringing food. A shopkeeper would say sorry while helping a customer. Someone would say sorry before asking a question. Someone else would say sorry while offering assistance. At first, I assumed I was misunderstanding the language. Perhaps the word meant something different. Perhaps it was simply a translation issue. But then, one evening in Bangkok, I experienced it for myself. And once again, the lesson began with rain. Bangkok rain feels different from northern rain. It arrives with confidence. The clouds gather. The sky darkens. Then water pours from above, as if an invisible river has been tipped over the city. That afternoon, I had spent several hours walking through old neighborhoods near the Chao Phraya River. By evening, dark clouds cover the skyline. I hurried toward a small cafe to escape the storm. The cafe sat on a narrow side street hidden behind rows of old buildings. Inside, warm yellow lights reflected off wooden tables. The smell of coffee filled the room. Soft music played quietly in the background. Only a few customers sat inside. I ordered a drink and found a seat near the window. Outside, rain hammered against the glass. The city blurred into silver. For a while, I simply watched. Motorbikes stopping beneath awnings. Street vendors covering carts with plastic sheets. People running through puddles while laughing. Bangkok adapting to another storm. Then an elderly woman entered the cafe. She carried several shopping bags and looked tired. Every seat was occupied except the chair opposite mine. The woman approached cautiously. Then she bowed her head slightly. "Sorry, can I sit here?" I looked around. The seat was completely empty. There was nothing to apologize for. Of course. She smiled gratefully and sat down. A few minutes later, the waiter arrived with her drink. As he placed it on the table, he said, "Sorry for making you wait." The woman smiled. "No problem." I checked my watch. She had waited less than 3 minutes. Again, nobody had done anything wrong. Yet, apologies floated through the conversation like leaves drifting on water. Later, when the rain softened, the woman and I began talking. Her English was excellent. Her name was Suda. She had worked as a teacher for many years before retiring. When I mentioned the frequent apologies, she laughed immediately. Foreigners ask this often. So it isn't just me? No. She stirred her tea thoughtfully. Many times, when Thai people say sorry, we don't mean guilt. What do you mean? She smiled. We mean awareness. I frowned slightly. Awareness? Yes. She pointed toward the waiter. When he said sorry, he was acknowledging your waiting. He wasn't apologizing? Not really. The idea fascinated me. Back home, apologies usually implied responsibility. Someone had made a mistake. Someone had caused inconvenience. Someone had failed. But here, the words seemed to serve another purpose. A way of recognizing another person's experience. A way of saying, I see you. I know this affects you. I care about your comfort. Suda nodded as I explained my understanding. Exactly. Outside, the rain continued falling softly. Inside, the cafe glowed with warmth. And once again, I felt a familiar sensation. The feeling of looking at something ordinary and suddenly realizing it contained an entirely different meaning. Before leaving, Suda shared one final thought. Sometimes Western cultures ask, who is responsible? And Thailand? She smiled gently. Often we ask, how is everyone feeling? The sentence stayed with me. The next day, I witnessed another example. This time on a crowded city bus. The bus moved slowly through Bangkok traffic. Outside, motorcycles flowed between cars like schools of fish. Street vendors sold fruit at intersections. Towering buildings rose beside tiny food stalls. The city felt alive in every direction. The bus was nearly full. An elderly man boarded and searched for a seat. Immediately, a young office worker stood up. The older man thanked him repeatedly. The younger man responded with something that translated roughly as, sorry. Again, there it was, the mysterious apology. After leaving the bus, I asked a Thai friend named Anand about it. He laughed. He wasn't apologizing. Then what was he doing? He was showing humility. How? Anand thought carefully. Then he explained. In Thailand, if someone thanks you, sometimes you make yourself smaller. Smaller? Not physically. He smiled. You don't want to look proud. I considered that. In many Western cultures, compliments are often accepted directly. Thank you. You're welcome. Simple. In Thailand, however, people often seemed uncomfortable placing themselves above others. Humility appeared deeply woven into everyday interactions. Anan nodded. We try not to make people feel beneath us. That evening, we walked through a night market filled with lights and laughter. Food stalls stretched in every direction. Grilled seafood, fresh fruit, noodles, desserts. The smell alone could make someone hungry. As we wandered between the stalls, I noticed countless small examples of the same cultural pattern. A vendor apologizing when a customer waited 10 seconds longer than expected. A customer apologizing before asking a question. A young woman apologizing while squeezing past people in a crowded walkway. Not guilt, awareness, consideration. Kreng Jai. The invisible thread appeared again. Later, we stopped at a stall selling mango sticky rice. The elderly vendor greeted Anand warmly. They clearly knew each other. While preparing our food, the vendor accidentally dropped a spoon. Immediately, she apologized. Anand apologized too. Then both laughed. Nobody seemed upset. Nobody blamed anyone. The exchange happened almost automatically. Afterward, I asked Anand why he apologized when he had done nothing. He grinned. Because she felt bad. So, if she feels bad, I help her feel less bad. The answer was beautifully simple. If she feels bad, I help her feel less bad. At that moment, something finally clicked. Many of the behaviors I had observed over the past weeks were connected. The line at the noodle stall, the village meeting, the broken air conditioner, the endless apologies, different situations, same foundation. A continuous awareness of how actions affect other people emotionally, not merely physically, emotionally. And perhaps that was why Kreng Jai could sometimes seem stronger than written rules. Rules organize behavior. Kreng Jai organizes relationships. Rules define obligations. Kreng Jai defines consideration. Rules tell people what they must do. Kreng Jai asks what kind of atmosphere they wish to create. Neither replaces the other, but together they shape daily life. A few days later, I traveled south toward a smaller town where another lesson awaited me. The town sat beside a river lined with old wooden houses. Fishing boats moved slowly across the water. Children rode bicycles through quiet streets. Life seemed slower there, closer to the rhythm of nature. One evening, I visited a family-run restaurant overlooking the river. The owner was a cheerful woman named Dao. The restaurant became busy shortly after sunset. Every table filled. Orders arrived continuously. Despite the pressure, Dao smiled throughout the evening. Then, near closing time, a customer accidentally spilled an entire glass of iced tea across the table. The customer looked horrified, immediately apologizing. Before the apology even finished, Dao was already cleaning the table. And to my surprise, she apologized too. The customer apologized again. Dao apologized again. Both kept smiling. The entire situation ended in laughter. Afterward, I asked Dao why she had apologized. She shrugged, customer embarrassed. Yes, so I help. By apologizing? She nodded. If I also say sorry, then we share it. Share it, not assign blame. Share it. The concept felt profoundly different from what I had grown up with. Many cultures instinctively search for fault. Who caused the problem? Who is responsible? Who should apologize? In Thailand, at least in many situations, people often seemed more interested in reducing discomfort, making the situation lighter, helping everyone leave with dignity intact. That night, after returning to my guest house, I sat outside beneath a sky filled with stars. The river reflected moonlight. Insects sang from the trees. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the darkness. I thought about all the invisible things I had learned since arriving in Thailand. Not facts, not statistics, not historical dates. Human habits, ways of seeing, ways of caring. Things easy to miss if you only visited temples or beaches. Because the real lessons often lived in conversations, in pauses, in small acts of consideration, in moments so ordinary they barely seemed important. And yet, together they revealed something remarkable. Kreng Jai was not simply about avoiding conflict. It was not simply about being polite. It was not even simply about kindness. It was about awareness. The constant awareness that every person carries invisible feelings, invisible worries, invisible pride, invisible burdens, and if possible, we should try not to add unnecessary weight. The river flowed quietly beneath the moon. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once. Then, silence returned. As sleep slowly approached, I realized my understanding of Thailand had changed again. The country I thought I knew before arriving had been built mostly from stereotypes. Smiles, tourism, food, beaches. But beneath all of those things existed something deeper, a social wisdom developed over generations. A wisdom that asked people to notice one another carefully, to move gently through shared space, to think not only about what is correct, but about what is compassionate. And the greatest lesson was still waiting, because before I left Thailand, I would witness one moment that finally explained why many Thai people sometimes choose harmony over rules. A moment so simple that I almost missed it, yet it would change the way I understood human relationships forever. Chapter 5, the day I finally understood Kreng Jai. By the time my journey through Thailand was nearing its end, I believed I understood Kreng Jai. At least, I thought I did. I could explain it. I could describe it. I could even recognize it when I saw it. But understanding an idea and truly feeling it are not always the same thing. And as I would soon discover, I still had one final lesson left to learn. It happened in a small riverside town during my last week in Thailand. The town was quiet, not the kind of place that appears in travel magazines. No famous temples, no famous beaches, no famous attractions. Just a river, a market, a few cafes, wooden houses, and people living ordinary lives. Sometimes those are the places that teach us the most. I arrived in the late afternoon. The sky was painted with soft shades of gold and pale blue. Fishing boats drifted slowly across the river. Children chased each other along narrow streets. The air smelled of grilled fish and charcoal smoke. Everything felt peaceful. I checked into a small guest house run by an elderly couple. The husband introduced himself as Somchai. His wife was named Lek. Both greeted me with the kind of warmth I had encountered throughout Thailand. Not exaggerated friendliness, not forced hospitality. Simply genuine kindness. The guest house had only 6 rooms. A wooden deck overlooked the river. Potted plants filled every corner. Wind chimes hung beneath the roof. In the evening breeze, they produced soft sounds that blended perfectly with the river below. That first evening, I sat on the deck writing notes in my journal. The sky gradually darkened. Lights appeared along the riverbank. The world slowed. Eventually, Somchai joined me carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to me. "Thinking?" he asked. "Always." He laughed. "Writers." We sat quietly for a while. No pressure to fill the silence. No urgency. Just tea, river sounds, evening air. Then he asked a question. "What have you learned about Thailand?" I smiled. "A lot." Such as? I considered the question carefully. Then I began describing everything I had experienced. The noodle stall, the village meeting, the apologies, the broken air conditioner, Kreng Jai, harmony, consideration, human relationships. Somchai listened patiently. When I finished, he nodded. "Good." Then he surprised me. "But you still don't understand." I laughed. "Really?" He smiled. "Not completely." "What am I missing?" Instead of answering, he pointed toward the river. A small boat was approaching the dock. 2 fishermen sat inside, one older, one younger. The boat moved slowly through the fading light. When it reached the dock, the younger fisherman jumped out first and tied the rope. The older fisherman began unloading baskets. One basket slipped. Several fish spilled onto the wooden dock. The younger man immediately apologized. The older man immediately apologized. Then both laughed. I smiled. More apologies. Somchai shook his head. "Look closer." The 2 fishermen gathered the fish together. No frustration. No blame. No embarrassment. Only cooperation. A few minutes later, they finished and walked away side by side. Still talking. Still smiling. Then Somchai asked, "Who made the mistake?" The older man dropped the basket. "Who apologized first?" "The younger man." "Why?" I paused. For the first time, I wasn't sure. Somchai waited patiently. The river flowed quietly beside us. Finally, I answered. Maybe he didn't want the older man to feel bad. Somchai nodded. "Yes." Suddenly, I remembered something Dao had said at the restaurant. If someone feels bad, help them feel less bad. Share the burden. Do not increase it. Do not magnify it. Lighten it. And for the first time, I began seeing the deeper layer beneath Kreng Jai. It wasn't only about avoiding discomfort. It wasn't only about preserving harmony. It wasn't only about being polite. It was about carrying part of another person's emotional weight. A quiet form of generosity, one that often goes unnoticed. The next morning brought the lesson into even sharper focus. I woke before sunrise. The river was covered in mist. The world felt suspended between night and day. Everything was silent except for birds beginning their morning songs. I walked toward the market as the town slowly awakened. Vendors arranged vegetables. Fishermen unloaded boats. Monks collected alms. The first sunlight touched the water. Near one corner of the market, I noticed an elderly woman carrying several heavy bags. She moved slowly, carefully. The bags looked far too heavy for her. Before I could offer help, 3 different people stepped forward. A fruit seller, a teenager, a motorcycle taxi driver. Each offered assistance. The woman accepted one person's help. The others smiled and continued walking. Nobody demanded recognition. Nobody expected praise. The moment lasted less than a minute. Then life continued. Yet something about it stayed with me, because nobody acted according to a written rule. No law required assistance. No sign instructed them to help. No authority supervised the situation. The action emerged naturally, from awareness, from attention, from seeing another person's burden. Later that day, I asked Lek about it. She smiled as though the answer were obvious. When you see someone carrying something heavy, you help. But why? She laughed softly. Because they are carrying something heavy. Simple, direct, beautiful. I thought about all the conversations I had experienced during my months in Thailand. Again and again, people seemed less interested in abstract principles and more interested in human realities. Not who deserves help, but who needs help. Not who is correct, but who is affected. Not what is technically fair, but what is compassionate. Of course, rules still mattered. Thailand has rules, laws, procedures, systems. People follow them every day. But what fascinated me was how often another layer existed beneath those structures. A layer built from relationships, empathy, awareness, consideration. Kreng Jai. That evening, on my final night in town, something happened that finally completed the lesson. A storm arrived shortly after sunset. The wind strengthened. Rain swept across the river. The wooden deck outside the guest house became slick with water. Guests gathered indoors to wait out the weather. Candles flickered on tables. Tea was served. The atmosphere felt strangely cozy despite the storm outside. At one point, the electricity briefly failed. The room fell into darkness. A few people laughed nervously. Someone dropped a spoon. Someone else bumped into a chair. Nothing serious, just a brief moment of confusion. Then something remarkable happened. Without instructions, without discussion, people began helping one another automatically. One guest found a flashlight. Another lit candles. Someone helped an elderly traveler find a seat. Another person poured tea for everyone. Within minutes, the room felt calm again. The problem had disappeared, not because anyone was in charge, because everyone contributed. Nobody asked, whose responsibility is this? Nobody asked, who should handle it? Instead, people simply noticed what needed doing and did it together. As I watched the scene, a realization finally settled over me. Perhaps this was why Kreng Jai remains so powerful in Thailand, because at its best, it creates communities filled with small acts of care, invisible acts, unrecorded acts, acts that rarely appear in guidebooks. Yet these acts quietly hold society together. A person waits a little longer. A person speaks a little softer. A person helps someone save face. A person carries part of another person's burden. One act alone seems insignificant. Thousands of acts become a culture. The storm eventually passed. The electricity returned. The guests drifted back to their rooms. The river outside reflected moonlight once more. Everything became quiet, very quiet. I stepped onto the deck one final time. The air smelled fresh after the rain. The water moved gently beneath the stars. Somewhere far away, a boat engine hummed softly in the darkness. I thought about the person I had been before arriving in Thailand. I believed rules created good societies, and I still believe that. Rules matter. They protect people. They create fairness. They provide structure. But Thailand had taught me something equally important. A society is not built only by rules. It is built by relationships, by consideration, by countless moments when people choose kindness even when no rule requires it. Before coming here, I often assumed that directness was always the highest form of honesty. Now I wasn't so sure. Sometimes honesty means speaking plainly. Sometimes honesty means understanding what another person needs. Sometimes wisdom lies not in proving a point, but in preserving a connection. The river continued flowing beneath the moon, endlessly, patiently, like time itself. And as I stood there listening to the quiet sounds of the night, I finally understood why so many Thai people place such importance on Kreng Jai. Not because rules are unimportant, not because harmony is always easy, not because conflict never exists, but because every person carries invisible burdens, invisible worries, invisible struggles. And if we can make those burdens a little lighter for one another, the world becomes a gentler place. Perhaps that is the real lesson. The lesson hidden beneath the smiles, beneath the politeness, beneath the apologies, beneath the silence. A lesson I had traveled thousands of miles to learn. Thailand was never simply teaching me how Thai people live. It was teaching me how human beings can care for one another, quietly, patiently, without needing recognition, without needing reward, like rain falling softly on a sleeping village, like a river flowing through the night, like a stranger offering help before being asked. And as the stars reflected across the dark water, I closed my notebook for the last time. The wind chimes moved gently above me. The river whispered below. The town slept peacefully beneath the moon. And somewhere in that beautiful silence, I realized something. I had come to Thailand searching for stories, but the most valuable story was the one Thailand had written inside me. A story about kindness. A story about consideration. A story about the quiet power of seeing another person's heart. Good night, the end. Thailand still holds countless stories waiting to be discovered. If you would like to continue this journey together, I hope to see you again in the next story from Thailand Through Eyes. And if there is somewhere in Thailand you wish to visit through story, leave your suggestion below. Perhaps our next journey will begin there.